welcome back to the podcast. Michael Sakata is here from MTBMA.org. They are the Maryland Transportation Builders and Materials Association. They promote and protect the needs of the transportation, construction, and materials industry. The MTBMA exists to identify, address, and resolve problems affecting contractors and aggregate producers, making sure that their voices are heard in the legislative arena. They organize and promote meetings, classes, seminars, and conferences to help maintain a well-informed and engaged industry. And that seems like, just to me, listening, like something where a lot of things can go wrong, a lot of things need to be aligned, a lot of the hard work needs to happen. And that definitely means that we need to step up, show some leadership in the construction space, culture within the organization. So Michael is going to be telling us about what he does to raise some awareness there, but also just passing along some of these insights, some of this wisdom as far as leadership and what he's figured out along the way. So Michael, glad to be speaking with you.
Yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate your time. Thank you for all your listeners who care about infrastructure spending, infrastructure, transportation space, and obviously leadership in the transportation space. And I'm just happy to be here. Absolutely.
Yeah, and just as a layperson, I feel like there definitely needs to be some awareness, especially like these last 2 years. There's all this like legislation passed, and it seems like every decade there's just this kind of discussion about like the crumbling infrastructure, so to speak, and like you build these concrete roads, bridges, etc. Things fall apart. Money needs to go back into fixing things, but then it seems like the average person is kind of ungrateful, right? Because you think, oh, this road's delayed, or when are they going to fix building that bridge? It seems very negative, but I always love to jump in and get educated and get the real facts and to get some positivity and just new ways of thinking about things, right? New perspectives. So what are we missing about the construction industry, especially about the space that you occupy?
Yeah, so the layperson, to your point, right? My family and friends, they hear about the Infrastructure and Jobs Act by the President Biden bipartisan infrastructure bill, historic by all accounts. We're in the last 2 years of that bill. Put a lot of money injected into infrastructure spending, the roads, the bridges, highways, all that stuff. But in reality, a lot of that money, it is. It's also funded by state funds. So meaning that Fed government is not paying for everything; they're paying for a large portion. It's a state reimbursable match program. What does that mean? The state dollars go into funding a portion of those interstate highway systems, the bridges, all those things. So the states have to have a match, right? And a lot of the reality is you look at out there these cars are higher miles per gallon. They're using EVs out there, kind of eroding what state infrastructure programs have used for the last 100 years, which is a gas tax, right? We hear about that. We see it, Robert. We all see the gas you're driving by. It goes up in the summer, goes down in the winter, goes up during COVID, down, all those things, right? Good indicator. And a lot of folks think that, that's the indicator of inflation. But, there's a lot that goes into that. But the reality is that's what funds majority of the infrastructure that's out there, right? Those roads and bridges. Funny thing we always say is, these contractors, it's a low bid system, right? So we drive over those bridges that you talked about. On the lowest bidder won that job. Okay, so if that's anything helpful for you as you drive over the Bay Bridge, or any bridge that you talk about. But yeah, very interesting how the sum of all its parts, the state and Fed match it.
It is interesting, and it's a little scary, right? When you think about like these huge numbers, whenever this is discussed, and they talk about like billions of dollars, millions of cars, and like the money has to come from somewhere, and it's always there's never a good solution, right? Well, do you match? Do you gas tax? Do you toll roads? But it has to come from somewhere. And so as far as the Maryland Transportation Builders and Materials Association come into play as far as like the messaging and the awareness. So we're talking about like the that's all helpful with the funding, but what maybe are the problems that aren't being discussed enough that you feel need some attention?
I think that you hit it right. It's we don't have to look too far. It's the declining um, motor fuel tax. Last 100 years, that's been the only mechanism, the primary mechanism. I don't want to say that there are excise taxes, there are taxes that they put on the how much your vehicle is worth. A few states, about four of them, are doing what's the mileage-based user fees. Those are fees where if I only drive 1,000 miles a year, I pay X amount of dollars. I pay if I drive 15,000, I pay that more. In the reality, you should be paying for the roads and the services that you use. Now, the motor fuel tax is definitely something we kind of want to make sure that people know that nowadays versus 10 years ago, 20 years ago, that money it makes it to makes these projects tougher and tougher to build. You've got rising labor costs, you've got rising project costs, all those things. It costs money, right? And we need more infrastructure spending, not less. And um, definitely that is probably the biggest thing is the lack of what the motor fuel tax was 10, 20 years ago. And you look at the Congress, I mean, the last time they increased the motor fuel tax was 1993. So, however many years ago, a long time ago, right? Um, it makes a challenge at the state level as well.
Okay, so a whole generation ago. And so, I mean, do you have any thoughts as far as the solutions? Because from when I like read into this kind of thing, there's always the comparison with other countries. How for some reason it's very American to have your own car, and then a lot of other countries have embraced public transportation. They show like pictures of like here's what 100 people looks like in a bus versus 100 people in the car, and it seems ridiculous in comparison. And then you also think, again, going back to the layperson thing, you think like, well, aren't like when they invent all these space age materials, like haven't they made the building cost, the material costs better? Can't they make roads that like last forever? Why is it that in like the Roman Empire times they built roads that like are still standing? Like, why don't we have the technology to like build a road once and it lasts like 100 years?
A great couple of questions there. So, compare your U.S. to other countries. We're much broad. We are our infrastructure requires a lot more um, the heavy rail investment, heavy um, infrastructure investment. Why you can't compare that? It just we're not set up that way. If this were planned out 100 years ago, I think that would be a lot easier. But there are so many issues just from permitting, environmental problems that kind of really slow some of these TOD projects around the country. So it's comparing apples to oranges a lot of times. Um, and you look at even some of these states compared to some of these countries. It's amazing. So the reality is we need a large investment, a large investment from not just the federal level, the state level, and the local level. But in reality too, we are Americans, right? We love our cars. Okay, we love our cars. Look at post COVID. People are moving 10 miles further out than they were prior to COVID because now there's these work from home opportunities that people can get a bigger house. They can do something, get something different. They can live on a farm, wherever, But the reality is people are driving further and further in to their place of work. And
Okay,
the other
yeah.
question about infrastructure, the materials, right? I think it's just like everything else. Um, you know, we are trying to leverage the dollars that we have to build that road, that bridge. And most of these bridges, by the way, too, have a 50 to 75 year lifespan, and which a lot of them are holding up to that too.
Okay, fair enough. So there's a lot of factors in play and a lot of things that we're kind of stuck with for better or worse, right? It'd be great if things were magically different, but like we're Americans, we love our cars, and then there's also the money factor where we might have the technology to do this or that, but like there has to be the balancing it with the what it costs. And so as far as the MTBMA, the Maryland Transportation Builders and Materials Association, to give us like an idea of what they're all about. Like, what's kind of the mission there, and like who are the people? Who are you helping, protecting, allied with?
I thank you for that. Yeah, so we're dedicated to promoting, protecting the needs of the transportation, construction, and materials industry. It's simple as it sounds. So we've got events, we've got um, lobbying activities, classes, seminars, conferences, to engage of all the firms in the transportation space. But we are focused in just transportation and everybody within transportation, and represented quite well down in Annapolis, to make sure their voices are heard.
Very cool. And so, and what's so fun about jumping into all these different industries is like it's the same, but it's different, right? You still do classes and webinars, and if someone has like an app or like real estate industry, like it's like the industries are different, but the kind of the technology or the solutions are the same. And then whenever these things like transportation come up, for some reason it can get boring to the average person, right? Like when you talk about like roads and trains and things like that. But what I find an interesting idea with any kind of marketing is taking the dull or the boring and making it exciting and making it something that's kind of you add the magic to it. And so, do you come across that at all, or does that enter your mind as far as like making transportation, builders, materials, like making it fun and accessible and just like finding the entertainment in it?
100%. I mean, I think you got to have fun with what you're doing, no matter what you're doing in life. Um, I think with you've got it. These, to your point, there are similar issues, just different industry, but similar legislators that we focus with, that we work with, but a different industry, and you have to work with them. You have to, I wouldn't say make it fun, but you have to at least make it um, a point that they understand, that resonates with them.
Okay. And so do you have a fun story to speak to that? Like it's one thing to, talk about like ideas and concepts, but then it helps me as far as the learning aspect to say like, hey, this guy Mike and his team and his organization, they went in and like worked some magic somewhere. They did some kind of before and after. So in all the excellent work that you've done with the education and the leadership and the meeting, do you have a fun kind of success story to share with us?
Uh, a lot of success stories. I think the most recent one is our um, Worker Protection Act, and that is the bill we championed with the governor's office, with our MDOT partners, to pass a robust bill to change driver behavior. What we saw, there's a few accidents that happened here in Maryland, um, and probably one of the worst in the country. It took the lives of 6 folks, and it wasn't based on the management of traffic that was set up. Um, those 2 people were racing and um, down the road, and one in a million kind of came into the barrier there. So based on in a lot of things post the past few years, we've seen folks um, who are speeding, and we're talking 20, 30, 40, 50 miles, in not just non-work zones, but in work zones. And so we championed that bill, our legislators, to ensure that got passed. And we're seeing the fruits of that labor this past July and in January on um, tickets to be increased, work zone variable speed limits, blue lights at the beginning of work zones. So we're seeing a lot that's going to be involved with that.
Very cool. So you're making a change and making people aware of these things that happen and it's so weird because you think about okay when these car accidents happen like a certain percentage are the like the DUIs and a certain percentage is the distracted driving, but then it seems like there's sometimes just like bad configuration like in the small town I live in is called Turlock, California. There's this one area that's kind of like there's like a school zone that ends and a residential begins and it's kind of like an expressway at the same time and there's like a few times a year there's these fatalities and sometimes these like 90-mile-an-hour collisions and I drive through it and I'm just like this is some normal little intersection and so it's so it's just interesting to think about right how there's just like different reasons why these accidents injuries sometimes occur and sometimes it's like the location configuration like you said you need to add the blue light or like just tell people what's up and kind of make changes to what's set up there. And so what has you excited about the future? Like you've done all these cool things, you've done the training, the awareness. What is in store as far as the up ahead horizons for MTBMA?
I would say, there's a lot to be thankful for. There's a lot, we've got a lot of the Work Zone Protection Act is just starting up to that point. There's a lot of work we need to get done here from infrastructure spending, that state match. There's a lot of projects in our area that we're working on from this Francis Scott Key Bridge, as you probably heard, and other area projects that we are working to get that state match for to get to be built and to make sure that we have a better quality of life for those people trying to get to and from work, to and from daycare, to and from the job. There's transit projects that are coming up. There are highway and bridge projects that much needed state match for.
Okay, and you're here to tell us about that, and I completely forgot about that bridge. That was like national attention. That was a crazy accident, and that's right there in your area, in your zone. So, like, what are the odds, right? And so, one thing I want to make sure that we cover near the end of our conversation is this idea of leadership. I know that you're big on the change management and leading people, and but like what is frustrating for me in that subject is that many times people kind of throw out the phrases that you hear a lot. And so as far as what people need to hear about leadership or what you've done or what you've learned, like what do you have to say about leadership and especially what's maybe not spoken about enough and what is unique to you about like your views, opinions on leadership?
I think leadership. Um, a lot of people. There's books. There's so many things on leadership. At the end of the day, leadership is it's learning. It's working with your team. It's learning, working with your board members, with folks across the aisle to get something done. In reality, leadership is it's simply having a goal and knowing how to achieve it and getting everybody on the same page. I know that maybe not the answer that you want there, Robert, but at the end of the day, getting working with other folks and explaining your issue, explaining your problems, explaining what will specifically like this Worker Protection Act, right? Explaining that there are lives out there that are going to be helped because of it can go a long way.
I like that. And there's a lot built into that answer there, right? And you mentioned a few times about how, it's not just about the stuff or the materials. You're like, hey, there's people that they need to get to daycare, they need to get to jobs, to work, to home. It's like you're actually making a difference. And that can maybe be somewhat of a motivator. And I do like what you said there about like getting people on the same page and having that common goal because the human nature of it can very be you can be tempted to like argue and fight with people, right? And then there's this kind of need to like mentally sort through the problem. So like, well, if there's this little issue, if someone's being angry or difficult or whatever, does that really matter? Versus like, hey, does this help all of us get to where we need to go? So it's like there's some very helpful lessons and things for us to really think about. And so I said at the beginning that I don't know very much at all about what it is that you do, and I don't know much about the transportation industry. So to help me out a little bit, is there a missing hidden question in our conversation? Is there a question that I should be asking you if I knew more about your industry that you wish that I would ask you?
You asked it really. I mean, I think what I want people to take away is, you know, how do our roads, our bridges, infrastructure is not just built but funded, right? And I think you ask it there. It's complex to some degree, but majority of it's paid for by that gas tax, those excise taxes, and that's what funds. And I think you the ask too from that is make sure that your legislators, make sure your folks know how important it is to not just have an efficient way to and from work, but also a safe one too, right? We also want to protect, as you're in your car, you're in your bus, bike lane, whatever, protect the workers too, right? Protect everybody, and I like to say the system of systems, right? Um, Sometimes you're going to take metro. Sometimes you're going to take, yeah, obviously, trains, planes, all this stuff. So we need it all.
We need it all, and it's helpful to be educated about it all. And that goes both ways, right? Because there's what we know, and instead of just like griping about, well, this or that little tax, we like know what it goes to, know that it's important, know that it helps you and others in your community. And then you also mentioned there about like the other direction there of let your local government people know that like what you need and what you don't like about your area, and it helps everyone involved to be more socially and governmentally, civically aware of what's going on, and that way we can participate. And it might not be the most exciting thing, and it gives me flashbacks to like in school when we'd go and visit like the state capitol and things like that. But it's very important, and we maybe take for granted when we're like driving down a road or a bridge or something that like a lot of work and a lot of ongoing work and money and people goes into making all that work to making us able to navigate, and also, as you said, to keep us safe. And so what are some next steps here? We have mtbma.org, and so what type of person should be going there, and what should they be looking for?
You know, um, I would say you really anybody there. I don't mean that. The folks obviously in transportation infrastructure, sure, um, but those folks already know about MTBMA. Those folks already understand. They're members. I would say the traveling public who want to know more information about advocacy, how to get involved, what projects are out there, how they could, be part of some of these community outreach programs. So anybody who cares about their infrastructure and how the money is being spent.
Okay, and that's the amazing reality of the internet is that all the information is out there for better or for worse, but it's up to us to sort the signal from the noise. And so if you're out there, especially in Maryland, then go to mtbma.org. MTBMA, they are the voice of the transportation, construction, and materials industries in Maryland. They want to project a positive image of the transportation, construction, and materials industries, conduct all business in compliance with antitrust laws, support reasonable regulations, high quality standards, and so much more. So if you have this interest in the transportation industry in all these aspects that we mentioned, mtbma.org is the place to go and click and look around. And as we wrap up our conversation here, Michael, it's time to maybe put you on the spot slightly and ask you for a fun quote or lesson, either in business or in leadership or marketing or something else, just a fun quote or lesson to really like give us an amazing finale to our conversation. So what comes to mind as far as a quote or lesson?
You know, I appreciate that. I don't know whether this is a quote that I like, um, is a quote by Winston Churchill. I use this philosophy in um, in life, in sports. Um, Perfection is the enemy of progress, I think is what he says. And it's a quote that kind of just gently reminds you that strive for progress rather than perfection. And, it truly moves you forward. I use that often, part of it, our industry, you know, is doing amazing things, doing wonderful things. Um, and what we also need to make sure that we are continually working to be safer, to be more efficient, and to learn, so you can have those meaningful and lasting advancements in infrastructure.
Very cool. You're so right. If we pursue perfectionism, nothing would ever get done. I think about some of these stories, like when they paint the Golden Gate Bridge from one end to the other. By the time they're done, it's time to start on the other end. And then you also mentioned some of these bridges that have a lifespan of 60, 75 years. Nothing lasts forever, and so many times you do your best, but then it's time to go in and rebuild some more. So very metaphorical and insightful in many very different industries. Perfectionism is something that we should not pursue. Pursue progress instead, and go now to MTBMA.org to check out the Maryland Transportation Builders and Materials Association. We were just speaking to Michael Sakata, the president and CEO, and thank you very much, Michael, for stopping by and just giving us all these cool insight, stories, and lessons.
Thank you very much, Robin. I appreciate your time.